And how are you tonight? I wonder what the new ones are thinking when you're saying that. Who is new? Who is here for the first time? You see? Our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, used to start the services like that. He asked, how are you? How is everyone? And then the congregation said, awakened, ready. So I'm very happy that you are awake. All right, all right. You know, we have a tough subject tonight. It's a hard one. And you said you're ready, right? That's it. All right. When we want to bake a cake, we have to put in all the ingredients that are necessary. And if we leave out an important ingredient, it's going to be a very sad cake, right? And the same goes for the spiritual path. Many people think it is only through meditation. That is not true. Attitude, right attitude, positive attitude is a very, very important ingredient. Right attitude towards God, Guru, the teaching, ourselves. Many people have a lousy attitude towards themselves. Right attitude towards other people. Right attitude towards all the various conditions and experiences of life. Now that's a vast subject, and I couldn't possibly cover the whole thing, all those different aspects in a short talk like that. So what I want to do, I want to boil it down to a basic principle. And if we understand that, and then we can apply it in all the various situations and conditions in life. First of all, I want to say perspective. And that is one of the main reasons why we have a convocation. One reason is to review some of the essential aspects of the Master's teachings. Another one is to hopefully get a spiritual recharge. And another one is to get perspective. What is life all about? What is the purpose of life? And because delusion, this world, Maya, has the intention to lose our perspective and get engrossed completely in the outer drama of life. And so, I want to say this, you probably have heard it already in the classes. What is the purpose? God. God realization. Now, why are we here? Why are we here? The Master often said, and not only he, many different saints and different religions, this world is not our home. We really don't belong here. We are children of God. We really don't belong here. And that is why you find the various saints and various religions, they have called this earth, this physical plane, the valley of tears, the exile, the valley of sorrow. So why are we here? School. School. We are here in a process of gaining God consciousness. We are here in a process of evolution, spiritual evolution, where we are to learn our lessons, work out our past karma, overcome limited, unnecessary desires, and eventually attain that divine consciousness which makes us free, so that finally we can graduate, get our diploma from this material plane, and can go to our home, not just for a little vacation, and then having to come back to school, but for good. So this is basic. This is the most basic thing that you have to keep in mind. Because without that knowledge, and most people in this world do not know this at all, they are seeking fulfillment in the external, where they can never find it. But if we once understand this, really understand it, and keep it in mind, then, and then only, does life make sense. And all our experiences, and all our conditions, and all the tests and trials that we are going through, only then does it make sense. Look at life, the constant struggle, constant battle between the duality, good and evil, darkness and light, pleasure and pain, life and death. That's not, we don't belong here. We're children of God. Or the constant struggle for survival, or even the struggle for achievement. Think of it. Of course, we have to do the best we can to be successful in life, isn't it? That's part of school. But take one life. Let's say a person is successful in business, in science, in the arts, or whatever. One life. What is one life? It's a flash of time in a vast ocean of eternity. And so the Master, Paramahansa Yogananda, said this, I want to quote. Life is like this. You have prepared dinner, and suddenly a bear comes and upsets the table, and you have to run away. Now, obviously, he's talking about a picnic table out somewhere in nature, because most of us don't have a bear in the house, right? But then he says, he is using this only as an illustration. He said, the bear, you have led your life like this, working for a little security, and then the bear of disease comes, and your heart stops, and you're gone. Why live in such a state of uncertainty? Unimportant things in your life have assumed the first place. You allow various activities, meaning unnecessary activities, to engage your time and enslave you. How many years have slipped by in this matter? Why let the remainder of your life slip by? If you make up your mind today that you will not let any obstacle deter you, you will conquer. And so, this is it. This is underlying all the various experiences in life. It's the one great purpose, God realization, the goal. And when you see it this way, then you see all life like a long river that is moving in a very slow motion and very painfully towards the ocean of God consciousness, infinite bliss. Because most people do not know what it is all about. That's why it takes so long. And it's so painful. And if once you understand it and really understand it, then we see life makes sense and all our experiences make sense, and then we can learn our lessons fast and combined with the teachings, with Kriya Yoga, and the Guru by our side, then we can go fast. It's still painful, but it's not as painful anymore as it was before. And above all, it's fast. So with this I have covered the subject. This is it in a nutshell. But of course, if I would walk off now, I would have a lot of explaining to do afterwards. So I want to go a little bit into some more in detail. First of all, I said we are in school. Do you like school? You do? I don't. I don't. Because school means hard experiences, tests and trials, difficulties, hard. It's a natural impulse. We don't want to do that because what are we? We are the soul. The soul is bliss consciousness. It's a ray of God's consciousness. That's what we are. And we want to. It's a natural instinct. We want to be bliss. We want to experience that bliss consciousness of the soul. But we are body identified. We are still immortal consciousness. And so we have to awaken that first. And until then, it's very hard. Even, I tell you a story. There was a woman who told a story about, she was in a supermarket. There was a long line checking out. There was a long line, lots of people ahead of her. And there was only one checkout line. And then she saw a young woman behind her who looked very tired. And she said to her, well, this is ridiculous. I'm going to the management to ask them to open another line so that you don't have to wait so long. And the young woman said, no, please don't. You see, she said, I'm the mother of newborn twins and a 2-year-old. And I don't want to go home. But you know, we have to. It's cool. I remember some time ago I had to go out on an assignment which I didn't like at all. And as I was walking to the car, it was a nice day, not as hot as now. It was a nice day. Thinking of my assignment, I saw one of our dogs lying in the sun there. And I caught myself thinking, I wish I were that dog. But you know, we can't. We have to face school. Most of you have read the book, God Alone, a book about the life of Gyanamata, one of the truly great disciples of Master. And her letters, her advice that she had given through the years to younger disciples, advice which she had learned at the feet of the Guru through her own training. And there's a whole section, a whole chapter on attitude. And I wish you read that once in a while to refresh, you know what it is all about. I want to quote a little bit from her. She said, you needed, she wrote that to another younger disciple, you needed what has happened. And so it is for us, those painful experiences, we needed that. And those painful experiences which are still coming in the future, we need that. Without it, and unless you live it through, you will never know yourself, because it is a process of growth, of understanding. And she talked about her own experience. When one time she was facing a very severe test. And there was always a resistance, I don't want to go through that. But then she said God gave her that prayer to which He would listen. Change no circumstance in my life. Change me. That means change my attitude. It goes all back to that. Attitude is of so supreme importance. And she said, do not tell me that the behavior of others is not better than yours. What is it to you how anyone else acts? It is your own life, it's your own soul that concerns you, meaning it is your own spiritual progress. Isn't it? Just like in school. The students are learning for themselves, not for others. And I want to go into one particular aspect, very important aspect, and that is we are living in a very stressful time now. Very stressful. And just recently I read there were some sociologists who analyzed, wanted to find out what causes the most stress. It was very interesting. They found it is not what people usually think is the great stress producers like job pressure, financial problems, sickness in a family, things like that. You know what it is? What causes the greatest stress in life? Interpersonal conflict. Isn't that amazing? Now, they just found that out. If they had studied Master's teachings, they would have learned that long ago, because long before the Master said, he put it a little differently. He said it from a positive aspect. He said, the greatest happiness next to divine happiness comes through living in harmony with those that you have to live with every day, in family, on a job, or whatever. Now, let's bring that into focus of our subject, attitude. What is the goal? God realization. And the most important discipline to get God is meditation. Because without meditation, we remain in body identification, body consciousness, model consciousness. Now, the next important discipline is to learn to live in harmony with other people. And that is attitude. Amazing, isn't it? How you bring that into focus. The most important discipline to God realization, next to meditation, is right attitude. And even meditation doesn't work. You know that from your own experience, isn't it? Most of you had that experience. You had trouble with somebody else. You try to meditate. Does not work, because as long as you're stirred up, you cannot concentrate on God. It is that important. Attitude. Now, I want to go a little bit more into this. Just recently there was a letter in a column of Handlanders, remember? There was a man, or a woman, I don't know, who wrote a letter expressing incredible hatred towards his father and stepmother. Incredible hatred, such as, when he dies, I hope he will rot in hell, and things like that. And Handlanders answered, and she said, I'm relieved to know that your letter didn't cause a fire in our mailroom. However, she said, I would like you to consider your hatred doesn't hurt your parents at all, while you are eating yourself up alive. Now, the Master In situations like that, and according to this principle, he went deeper than that. And he explained, he said, love is a powerful magnet. And those that you love, those that are close to you, they will invariably be drawn to you again in the future. Whether on this plane or in a higher plane, until we merge with them in God. On the other hand, he said, hate also is a powerful magnet. And you will be drawn to those that you hate again and again until you have overcome that strong dislike. Something to think about, isn't it? Now, how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we go about it to solve that problem? And I want to read to you from a letter of Gyanamata, that's also in that book, God Alone. And she is where, this is not just theory, this is very practical application. She wrote to a devotee, whenever you are involved in an unpleasant situation with another person, as you are at present, I believe the best method of handling the matter is to decide, what should I do? How should I act? And then concentrate wholeheartedly on living up to your decision. Now comes the point. Putting the other person and her actions entirely out of your mind. That's hard, isn't it? But that's the key. And then she said the first effect of this is that one becomes calm. Calm. And you know how important that is in dealing with difficult situations. Whenever I have remembered and lived up to this rule, I have met with surprising success. Whenever I have not followed it, but have expected to straighten things out by trying to effect a change in the other person, nothing but friction has resulted, and a lower vibration in my own consciousness. I maintain that holding my own consciousness on a high plane is of the first importance. If I take care of that, everything else will eventually come into line. Isn't that true wisdom? I deeply wish, now comes the point, it is not just in a case like that, but I deeply wish that you would be guided by this rule, not only in this particular situation, but in all the questions that the years will present before you to be decided and affected upon. Attitude. That's the practical application. And then she said, enough stress in education is not laid upon the need for courage in a character. We must learn to endure, meaning we have to learn, we have to accept the situation, we have to accept school. And then she said, in courage, one sees the brilliant triumph of the soul over the flesh. And then she said, and then to remember the words of the Lord Jesus, Father, save me from this hour. Think about it. Even he didn't like to go through crucifixion. Save me from this hour, but then he said, but for this cause came I unto this hour. As with him, so with us. How can we expect to escape that which we were born to endure? Meaning, we cannot escape those lessons which we have to learn in order to reach God consciousness. And then she said, no outward trial really matters. We should become stronger and stronger through our experiences until we are able to stand among those of whom it may be said that their conquest of self has been final, needing no further testing. That's when you get the diploma. You say, now, good, you go home. I'll tell you a story which you have heard probably. It has become a classic. And it's really a really wonderful story. That happened at the end of World War II, when the Americans marched into Germany and liberated prisoners in a concentration camp. And many of those prisoners, even with the best of medical treatment and food, were so far gone that they didn't survive. And there was one man who looked as healthy and strong as could be, and I thought he must have come into that camp just a couple of days ago. And when I checked the records, they couldn't believe it. He had been there almost from the beginning, 5 years. And nobody had survived that long. Nobody. And so they asked him, how come? And he told the story. He said he had been a lawyer in a Jewish section of a city in Poland. And when the German Gestapo came, they lined many of the Jews up and shot them down with machine guns. And he said, among the dead was my wife and my children. And he said, this is my life. I've lost everything. I don't want to live anymore. And he begged them to kill him too. And they didn't. Because, he said, I know German. And they used me for a while as an interpreter. And then they sent me into the concentration camp. And then he said, as a lawyer, I had observed, I have seen what hate can do to a person. Completely destroys his life. It's worse than being shot to death. And he said, I knew I have the choice to hate or to love. And I chose love. Not only towards the fellow prisoners, everybody, including the Germans, including Gestapo. Love. An act of will, act of choice, attitude. It's that powerful. So it is not, as Skinamata says, it is not, the point is what happens to us. This is not important in itself. What we become through our experiences is the important thing. Now, this is all pretty heavy stuff, isn't it? Pretty heavy. Now the Master said, you shouldn't take life too seriously. Don't take the outer drama too seriously, especially the painful experiences, because he said, if you do, you know what happens? You forget God. You forget the goal. And you're completely wrapped up in that outer concrete mixture of the world. And so he has to say to us, and I want to say the same thing to you. Now think back 10 years. 10 years ago. What did you do? Where were you? What were you? You can't even remember, right? It's not real. So the Master says, it is not that real as it just seems to be. It's a big movie. Don't take the movie too seriously. See behind, what is behind the movie. Cosmic movie director. There used to be, I think it's not anymore, I believe. I don't watch TV, but I read about it. One particular incident. The Dr. Welby, a series, Robert Young played the role of a doctor, and apparently it was a very sympathetic role, and apparently he had all the answers. But what I read about it was, this is the most amazing thing, that actor got all kinds of letters from all over, from people who asked him for medical advice. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. What those people see in that box, they think that's real. Incredible. The master said, don't take it too seriously. Now, last year I told you not to watch the news on TV. Do you remember? Who is still watching? And I told you why, because you're not getting the news. It's a completely distorted picture that you get. They do it in such a way that it makes you tense, full of stress, so that you don't turn off. And that hopefully you will buy that stupid thing, all those stupid things that they show you during the commercials, right? So now suppose, let's take a case, let's say you do turn that on, and you do watch the news. And there it happens, there it comes. Good evening, this is Peter Jennings, and giving you the 6 o'clock news. Today, nothing happened. No stock market crash, no plane crash, no homes burned in a fire, no accidents, nobody murdered, no war, all the terrorists took a day off. Once more, today, nothing happened. Thank you and good night. Now, what would you say? Boring. Boring. Isn't it? So what do people want to see? Now, I read you a movie ad. A story of passion, bloodshed, desire, and death. Everything that makes life worth living. I didn't make that up. That's a true movie art. And so that's why, God knows people want to be entertained. All kinds of crazy things. So He's giving them a movie that they want. Like that little boy who wrote a letter to God and said, "Dear God, why don't you make another flood, just for fun?" Well, Master said, you are a movie actor, each one of you. You're in a big movie. That you have to learn to be detached. You play it with full enthusiasm, and at the same time you're detached. Play it for God. So, and He said our earthly experiences serve as a process of destruction of our mortal consciousness. Isn't that interesting? One's values are profoundly changed when he is finally convinced that creation is only a vast motion picture, and not in it, but beyond it, lies the true reality. That's where we want to go. But then he said, yet no matter how trying life is, most people become accustomed to it and assume that there is no other way of life. Not being able to compare this life with a spiritual life. They do not realize how painful and boring life is. This earthly life, boring. I remember after 10 years being in this country, I went back to Europe on my first lecture tour. And I went to visit an old friend of mine. We had lost contact. We went to school together. We were very close. And he had become, in those 10 years, a very successful businessman. Lots of money. He told me all about it. He said, making money, no problem. But then he said, in the beginning it was a challenge. It was exciting. And then it became just routine. Just routine. And he said, I am bored to death. And then he asked me what I am doing, and I told him, and he said, you are completely crazy. And so there we were. He was bored to death. I was crazy. But I wasn't bored. Now, I want to tell you a few more points, just in regard to this life. The Master said, in this life, to be a millionaire or a poor man is the same, if you but understand. In other words, it doesn't matter really what role you play, because it lasts just a little bit. As I said before, life is a flash of time. Next time, if we have to come back, we play a different role. So, does it really make any difference what kind of a role we play? Does it really make a difference? Doesn't make a difference. We get that role which is necessary for us to grow the fastest, the best, the most. And then he said, all you have to remember is to play your part, small or big, cheerfully and well. That is all. And then, during the playing of your part, agreeable or otherwise, do not wish to play somebody else's part. That's the big catch. That's the big catch. Because, he said, for then you have to spend eons of time playing according to the change of your desires. Get away from that trap. But why do people want a different role? Because the present one is not satisfactory. Because no matter what we do, this world cannot give us the absolute fulfillment which we are all seeking. And so people are thinking, due to delusion, if I get this, or if I could be this and that other person, then never. It's hard to understand that. It's hard to understand. We may understand it intellectually, but to actually live it and know it in our life, it's hard. And you have to always keep it in mind. When I was in India, one time I was in a home of some members, and they had a framed sign hanging on a wall. And that sign said, there are two tragedies in life. Number one, not to get what your heart desires. Number two, to get it. There's deep truth in that, deep truth. Because the world cannot give us what we want. Impossible. You know why? Because this world is built on the principle of duality. Pleasure and pain. And the Master said these two are like Siamese twins. You cannot separate them. You cannot separate them. Where the one is the other. And the Master said, if you are attached to pleasure, you are in for a lot of trouble because pain is also there. And that is why nothing in this world can give us satisfaction. We have to go beyond Maya, beyond the duality, and there is God. That is bliss. That's beyond pleasure, beyond ordinary human happiness. That is the bliss consciousness, and only that can satisfy us. Only that. That is why the Master used to say, in the heart of each one of you, there is a terrible hunger for happiness, peace, love, joy, and the attainment of immortality. These are the things we want. Behind all our different desires, these are the things we want. And he said, only God can give us that. And I go back again to what I said before. If we understand this, our attitude will be different. It will be a right attitude to all the various experiences in life. Now, please understand, when I say overcoming desires and all that sort of thing, certain desires are all right because if they are connected with the role that we are playing, but we have to keep in mind, those things cannot satisfy us. We have to transmute it. And the thing is, we are not talking about suppression, mind you. Never. We're not talking about suppression. We're talking about transmutation. Now, I'll tell you a story of Saint Therese of Lisieux. It's a little flower. Just to see, the saints had struggles too. We are not the only ones. And so she was in a convent. And she told a story that during the daily meditation periods, there was always a certain nun sitting behind her, and that nun always made noise, fidgeting with her rosary and things like that. And Saint Therese listened to that noise and and she said she had the strongest urge to turn around and give that nun a look to stop that noise. And she controlled herself. She didn't. But she said the effort of not turning around was so powerful that afterwards, after all those group meditations, she was bathed in perspiration. That's suppression. And then after some time, she found a solution. She offered that noise to God. That's transmutation, change of attitude. No more perspiration after that. Simple. Attitude. There's another one. There was a man an American who moved to Mexico City, I believe, with his family. And they lived there for a while, and then one evening, in a neighborhood, some people had a party. And apparently, they wanted to have the whole neighborhood enjoy that party. They had set up loudspeakers outside. And that bouncy Latin music was going on all over the neighborhood, everywhere, all night long. And that man said, we couldn't sleep, not a wink, nobody could sleep. It went on, it was so loud. Again. And then the next day he talked to a neighbor, a Mexican, who was a doctor. He said, "Wasn't it terrible last night? I'm surprised that nobody called the police." And the doctor said, "Call the police? Why, I went out and bought a bottle of champagne and my wife and I danced all night." What's the difference? Attitude. So that's what you do. If you're upset about something, you go out and buy a bottle of carrot juice. Don't take life too seriously. The Master said, life is entertaining when you do not take it too seriously. And he said, a good laugh is an excellent remedy for human ills. And one of the best characteristics of the American people is the ability to laugh. To be able to laugh at life is marvelous. And to learn to laugh at yourself too, this is great. And I think we are all very creative in doing stupid things. I find myself being more creative all the time. You know, according to this. Did I ever tell you that story? It happened a few years ago. At that time, I had 2 pairs of black shoes, dress shoes. One was about 3 years old, and the other one was about 26 years old. And once in a while, I still wore the old ones because they were comfortable. I wore them at night. Nobody could see it. So that day, it was a Sunday, and I went to the temple and gave Sunday service and interviews and things. And when I came home and took my shoes off, I discovered that I had been wearing 1 shoe of each pair. Now, you know, the only thing they had in common was they were black. Totally different age, of course. Completely different shape. Completely different style. And when I saw that, I said to myself, Anandamoy, it's time. You have to retire. And if you think that nobody noticed, afterwards somebody gave me a gift certificate. For a new pair of shoes. So now, about our experiences, school, the tough ones, the painful ones. There was a man who went up a mountain trail, and he saw a mountaineer with an axe going up also. And he asked him, what are you going to do? And the mountaineer said, I need a piece of wood to fix my wagon. And for that, I need the toughest wood. And the toughest wood always grows up in the trees on the top of the mountain, where the trees are exposed to all the storms. And so it is with us. Those tough experiences, they bring out the strength in us, those powerful qualities of the soul which are necessary to find God. Willpower, endurance, perseverance, courage, positive attitude, hopefully, loyalty, faith. They make us tough, and we need that. At the same time, they make us soft, because you cannot win all the battles in life. Nobody can. I dare say there is not a single person in this hall and in the overflow room that never made a mistake. And I dare say there is not a single person in the monastic ashrams who never made a mistake. Many people do not understand this, that this too belongs to the spiritual growth. Talking about attitude, some people say when they are falling flat on their face, make a mistake, I am finished, I'm no good, I'm not spiritual enough, I'm a failure, all that sort of thing. Wrong. Totally wrong. It's important that you understand that. Totally wrong. Right attitude says, no matter what, I keep on. It's most important. I've seen this in personal counseling, I've seen it in letters that come in from Mother Center again and again. People say, I am no good, discouraged, I failed, and I'm a failure. Never say that. Never say that. Because our mistakes, I hope you understand it. We don't have to be, we have to watch that you are not careless. But as I've said, we are all creative enough to make the mistakes, out of human weakness or whatever. And so those times, this teaches us, first of all, understanding and compassion towards other people. And above all, that teaches us to surrender. As Master said in the autobiography of a yogi, to fling yourself at the feet of divine compassion. We, in spite of all the science and everything, science of yoga, we cannot make it by ourselves. We need the grace of God and Guru. As the Master said, 25% it is your effort, 75% grace of God and Guru. So when we are talking about attitude towards our experiences, keep this in mind. It's a very important thing. If you are discouraged, if you're saying you are a failure, I am no good, and you become depressed, that's one of the strongest weapons of Satan. That does not come from God. That does not come from truth. So keep this in mind. I want to give you a quotation by Sri Dayamata. She says, never be discouraged. Never think that you cannot make the spiritual grade, no matter how steep it seems at times. One of the most consoling and heartening bits of advice Master gave to us was this: a saint is a sinner who never gave up. Master told us to remember this whenever we get discouraged. Whenever we feel that we have fallen short of our spiritual goal, the saving grace of the would-be saint is that he never gives up. He always keeps on trying, no matter, now watch this, no matter how many times he falls, no matter how many mistakes he makes. That is not the important thing. The important thing is to keep on. And then she says, by never giving up, we prove to God that our devotion, our loyalty, our desire for Him are unconditional. Isn't that something? We think we have unconditional devotion and unconditional loyalty only when we are perfect. Not true. Not true. Even when we fall, even if we make mistakes, and we keep on, we have unconditional devotion, unconditional loyalty. If you forget everything else I have said, you remember this. That's enough. I'm satisfied. And so now I want to tell you a little story. It's an old story, you probably have heard it. It's several hundred years old. There was a time when they were building in France, in Chartres, the famous cathedral. And it was several hundred years ago. And a man in Italy heard about it, and he traveled to France. He wanted to see how they were building this cathedral. And he arrived just at the time when it was closing, when they stopped working. And so he walked around to different people, working people there. And he saw one man covered with dust, and he said, "What is your job here? What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm a stonemason. I'm carving stone blocks for the building." And another one said, "I'm a blacksmith. I'm pounding iron all day long." Another one said, "I'm a glass blower. I'm making colored glass for the windows," and so on. Different kinds of people. And then he saw an older woman with a broom. And he said, "And what are you doing here?" And she leaned on her broom and she looked up to the arches and said, "Me? I am building a cathedral for the glory of Almighty God." I thought that's a beautiful story, because all the other ones were completely engrossed in a little daily grind. And that woman had the vision of the finished cathedral. And so keep it in mind. Not letting the daily experiences, good ones, painful ones, so absorb your consciousness that you forget the goal. Always keep that vision alive, because you're building a cathedral, infinite consciousness, infinite bliss and immortality. Let us never forget that. Let us never forget that. God bless you all.